My name is Marilyn Misandry, and on today's video I want to talk about ways that you can make your drag shows and parties more accessible to disabled performers and disabled partygoers. So the first hint that I've got is always look at the venues that you're choosing. Now, when you choose a venue, don't just look for the obvious things on access. If they've got a disabled ramp outside, fantastic, but once you're in the club, is it easy to get around? Consider this. If someone's in a wheelchair, just because they can get inside the club doesn't mean the club is accessible to them. I've worked in clubs where there's a lovely disabled ramp that leads you all the way up to a steep flight of stairs with no lift. That's not accessible. As well as that, consider if you're booking disabled entertainers and performers, is there going to be space for them to get around? Are there lots of sudden tight corners in the venue? Is the stage itself accessible? Is it easy to get on and off with comfort and ease? Is the dressing room accessible? Or is that going to be somewhere where the disabled performers might be excluded? I think we all know how important dressing rooms are to drag culture and how often, as disabled performers, we just don't get to experience that. If you're, as well as that, look at disabled access in terms of toilets. Is there a disabled toilet? Is it open for all to use, or does it need a key? Are there changing facilities in there? Is it a space that would be comfortable with people coming and asking, hey, I need to use the disabled toilet, let me in? These are all things to consider when you're picking your venue. Now the next thing to consider, in my opinion, is stuff like your stage lighting and sound. Is your stage lighting accessible? Is it going to be full of strobes, smoke, loud noises, sudden flashes of light, and other things that might make it a really difficult time for disabled performers and disabled partygoers? Now let's take strobe lighting for example. I don't think I've ever seen a drag number where I went, that was really good, but what it needed was a big old strobe. Strobes are really dangerous, they're really unpleasant, and there's no real need for them within a drag show. Now Marilyn, I know you're saying, what will I do for cool lighting effects? Well, there's lots of them, and they quite often don't cause people to have seizures, or people like me to completely get freaked out and unable to perform. Consider as well, instead of putting the club into total darkness, why don't you use low lighting, mood lighting, relaxed lighting? And in terms of sound, in terms of audio, are you using BSL sign language interpreters? Are you using captions? Or stuff like that? Okay, so you've got your venue, which you can get in and get around, schmoozy around and have fun. You've got your lighting and your sound sorted. You've got your captions on. You've got your interpreter. But none of that is going to be any use to people at your party if they can't actually see the stage. Consider having spaces near the stage for seating and accessible views. There is nothing worse than being at a party as a disabled person trying to watch a show, needing to sit down and suddenly having a drunk 6-foot drag fan lumber in front of you and block your vision. Why not consider having the first few rows seated and have them as priority seating for disabled performers, disabled viewers of the show? Doing this is a really simple, easy way to make sure that everyone can enjoy your fantastic lighting, as we've mentioned, your fantastic interpretation, as we've mentioned, and your fabulous venue. And it's a really easy step to make. Just put out maybe 2 or 3 rows of chairs at the front of your stage show venue, and that's just one little way to make it more accessible. Now, the last point that I want to make about making your drag show as accessible as possible is perhaps a little bit more difficult and perhaps a little harder to police. But are you including disabled performers? Now, when I say are you including disabled performers, what I mean is, if I went into your dressing room and found everyone kikiing and having a good time, being witty, being fun, really getting that social element of drag, would I find the disabled performers in there? Or is the dressing room at the bottom of the flight of stairs? Or is the dressing room too small to get into? Or is the dressing room just in a part of the club that they can't access? So many drag performers have come to me and said, Marilyn, I had a great time performing last night. I really loved the crowd. I really loved the venue. I felt so left out. I couldn't get in the dressing room. And that's such an integral part of drag. Why not, when you choose your venue, look to see if there's a space where you can put everyone, communally or socially, as a dressing room space? And if that's not possible, why not look at perhaps encouraging your performers to interact outside of that space? Or finding ways to include disabled performers in that social element, because drag is such a social thing. As well as that, When you're taking pictures backstage, make sure that you're including your disabled performers. Make sure that you're finding ways to engage us and bring us in. It doesn't take much, as I've said in this video, but these little steps are all ways to make your show more inclusive and make us feel more included.